Two. Hi, Michelle. How are you today? And welcome to Estate and Succession Planning. So, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Estate and Succession Mastery. So I don't even know what we're doing today. So it's a good start. Anyway, it's a great day today, and I thought today we touched in our first session a few weeks ago just in regard to the whole 9-step estate planning process that we go through, and I just wanted to cover off today a few things just in regard to digging down a bit into, I guess, where we do the distribution matrix for clients and the different types of wills and so on, Michelle. And this has been prompted a bit. We've had some meetings with clients over the last few weeks, and this has kind of been appropriate. And you guys do such a great job. So, are you happy to talk about that today?
Yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay. Because I mean, the distribution matrix really is, in regard to estate and succession planning, it just helps create fairness between all the people in someone's estate. And we're not looking to create equality for people. We're looking to create fairness and so on. So let's kick off on that. And as I say, interestingly, today Tracy and I had a meeting with a client that's been working with us for a number of years now, and the thing we like to do each year is to get out the distribution matrix, which is a glorified spreadsheet, for want of a better expression, and just go through, update the values and so on. But sometimes then that can create imbalance between the fairness between all the kids. So what are your thoughts in regard to because you've done a number of these now, that you're actually putting together all of the distribution matrix? How do you find that it helps people going through their estate and succession planning?
So it's a really good tool for people to see, firstly, the size of their wealth. I think a lot of people don't understand the extent of their wealth, and so they sort of think, oh, we don't have that much. But then when they see it all written out, they can realize that there's a lot they have to think about and what they do with that. So it's good for that reason. But I find it's the sort of thing where people have in their mind an idea of who they want to give what to. And then when they see it on the matrix and see the figures down the bottom as to what each child is getting or whatever it is at the end, they change their mind 3 or 4 times over, and then sometimes revert back to the original thinking, because it really brings it to their mind how this will be practically.
Yeah.
So it's so good for actually visualizing what the end result could be.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, the issue too, Michelle, I hope I didn't cut over you there. Sorry. The issue too is sometimes you might give one asset to one child, and the tax liability comes with that, doesn't it? And so you think you're being fair between your kids, but one's going to end up with a bloody whacking great tax bill, and the other one just walks away scot-free. You do all those sort of calculations when you do these, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the columns is for tax, the tax outcome of these particular assets. So super could have a tax component, investment properties, things like that. So people might think, I'll give my home to this child and I'll give my unit up the coast to that child, and they're both the same value, so it'll be fine. But one could be CGT free or have no CGT, and the other one could have a huge bill. So it doesn't end up the same at the end. So it's a good way of seeing the result from that perspective.
Yeah. Also, Michelle, that probably raises an issue too, that if you give a child an asset that's got a huge tax bill and they don't have any cash, then unfortunately they're going to have to sell that asset, aren't they, to pay the tax. So, it allows people to think through and say, okay, well, if we do this and this kid ends up with a $300,000 tax bill, how's he going to, or she going to pay for that? And how do we make provision to make sure that they don't have to sell that asset or that farm or whatever, just because we've put them in that sort of position. But I just wanted to touch on too, a lot of times people just don't know what they don't know, and so many times we first meet with clients and they sort of come in and they say, well, this is what we want to do, and we're going to do this and this. But by the time we go through and discuss a few alternatives that they may not have considered, most times people end up doing something totally different to what they thought they were going to do because they didn't have all the information. And hopefully that's what we bring to the equation is different ways to think, so they can we help people think about their thinking, so to speak, which I think is very important. But also just touching on the clients we were chatting to with today, one of their assets, obviously, these are rural people, is a property. And, the last time we did the distribution matrix numbers with them was about 3 years ago. And they'd sort of worked out how to create fairness for the other two kids. So they've got one kid's going to get the property and the stock and all that sort of stuff. And the other two kids, the superannuation and other bits and pieces and so on. And they had fairness sort of worked out. And then when we redid the figures today, the property is now double what it was worth 3 years ago, which then creates a whole range of problems. So how do they, bring it back to fairness for the other kids as well? But that's the trouble these days, isn't it? Property prices are going up so quickly, so it can create some issues.
Yeah, no doubt there'll be other things that change in the future that skyrocket when property prices fall. Not that they might, but so and that also brings up another point: life insurance. So we include that when it's relevant, if they've got it on their distribution matrix. But if they reach a point in their life where it's no longer feasible to have life insurance, that can completely throw everything out to the point where other children might not receive much at all. And there's still, say, one child who's working in the farm who receives the bulk of the estate. So that's difficult to manage as well for some people.
Yeah, and that is an issue with insurance, isn't it? Because the premiums just, as people get up to Tom's age, for example, the premiums get very high.
Skyrocket, yeah.
I just couldn't help that. The premiums skyrocket, and then all of a sudden, you've got to make the decision. Do we keep the insurance going? Is it cost prohibitive? When people get into their late 60s, 70s, and so on, like someone we know, you've obviously got to look at that as part of the ongoing cost issue. So distribution matrix, just such an important part of the whole process, Michelle. I know you, as I say, you do a lot of these, and it's really important to go through, have people write down what they own, what they owe, what tax implications there are. How do you create fairness between everyone? And many times, and including the people today, you have to leave a contribution which is required maybe by one of the children to the other 2, 3, 4 kids, whatever there are, to sort of make up that differential. So do you want to go through, some thoughts in regard to what people do, time frames they do it over and so on?
Yeah, so often we can work into our estate planning documents a obligation on the child receiving the bulk of the estate, say the farming assets, put an obligation on them to pay to the other siblings X amount of dollars over, say, 5, sometimes 10 years. Can be sort of incremental payments, can be lump sum at some stage. But the thing to consider with that is it all looks great on paper, but the borrowing capacity of that child. So they've got a farm. It doesn't mean they've got loads of cash just sitting around. So they've probably got to go to the bank to fund paying out their siblings. So really also need to consider their borrowing capacity and what that might look like for them if you were to pass away. Can they even pay out their siblings, or would that require the farm being sold and nobody wins?
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. For example, let's say a farm was worth, just pick a figure, $20 million, which, with the way prices are going up these days, that's not an unrealistic number for a lot of the rural families. So you've got a $20 million property which is going to go to one child, and you've got 2 other kids, and most farmers don't have a lot of off-farm assets. They just keep pouring the money back into the farm, paying off the debt, buying new, upgrading the fences, digging new dams, and all those sorts of things, which we all know happens. And farmers tend to believe that, the greatest thing they can do with their profit out of a year is to reinvest it in the farm. But when you've got 3 kids and only one's going to come back onto the farm, you really need to be building silos of wealth off farm. One for yourself in later years when you want to stop being chased up the fence by the cattle, and but also for the other kids. And because you give one child $20 million worth of property doesn't mean that you need to find $20 million for each of the other 2 kids, do you? We've often talked about maybe a ratio of 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. So if the child getting the farm, for example, even though the farm's worth $20 million, what is probably fair is giving, $4 or $5 million to each of the other children if you could. And the reasons around that, and one is the child that gets the farm is probably never going to sell it. All they're going to do is hang on to it, work their backside off for their life, and then hand it on to their kids. So they're never actually seeing any folding money, so to speak. And the other thing is $4 million cash. There's lots of people that would probably rather $4.5 million cash, which they can get 5-6% in the bank on, as against a property they've just got to work their butt off 7 days a week for the rest of their life, and they'll be lucky if they pick up $100,000 a year. And that's the reality of it. Most properties now, you can't make a decent living out of a small size property. So the person that ends up with the cash is usually sometimes better off.
Yeah, well, that's right. We don't really often see kids fighting over who will get the farm. They're happy for that one person to take it because they'll take their 4 or 5 million in cash, and that's good for them. So, they don't necessarily need to be topped up, at least to any significant amount, to be comfortable with what they've received.
Absolutely, and gratitude always plays a big part in that. But the other thing is that the child that gets a $20 million farm, and we're just using numbers here, just an example. I mean, if you've got a $20 million farm and you've got 2 siblings, you've got to pay $4 million to each. Can that kid afford to pay off $8 million to his siblings to allow them to get some benefit from the estate as well? And it might be that $8 million over a $20 million farm is really starting to get up there, isn't it, in regard to debt ratios? And they might only be able to afford $3 million each for the kids, or 2.5 or something like that. So you have to look at affordability too, and the reality of the situation. So you're not putting a nurse in the neck of the kid that gets a farm having to pay off his siblings for the rest of his life. And if you make it too high a commitment to the other kids, the one with the farm may have to end up selling it anyway just to pay out his siblings. And then, in reality, no one wins. So, and that happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. The other thing in regard to the distribution matrix, I think we've covered that pretty well. It's just such an important part of the whole process, isn't it? Putting out in black and white, and I think for the clients too, being able to see what, it's not often they sit down and look at what they own, what they owe, what each child would end up with, and so on. And one of the things I always talk with clients right from the start is to stop thinking about it clinically and to focus on what's in their heart. A big thing of mine is, forget what the accountant, the profit and loss says and all those sorts of things. What is your heart saying that you should do to look after each of your kids? You might have one child that has needs to go to America to learn how to do something magical over there, and so how do you create opportunity for that child? You might have children with special needs and so on. They've got to be looked after first. But the distribution matrix really does set out quite simply for people how to best provide for their kids.
Yeah.
That's my thought. I'm going to just cut away from what we said we were going to talk about for a minute, Michelle, just to trick you here. But we've had a few conversations really recently with clients in regard to succession planning and so on. And just came to mind there when I was thinking about the clients we've been talking to this week, is that sometimes the viability of the farm isn't enough to be able to hand over the farm to the next generation, even if you've only got one child, and you want to hand the farm down to the next generation. By doing that, and I had a phone conversation with someone yesterday about this, and I'll tell you what advice I suggested they take in a minute. But I mean, we just asked them a number of questions. Said, well, if you hand the farm over to next generation one, can you work with each other? And of course, the dad and the son-in-law, there's no way in the world they can work together. So that was one sort of strike. I mean, it's the young bull, old bull scenario, and the young kids come in with new ideas and all that sort of stuff. Dad's done it this way for the last 50 years, so he doesn't want to change. There's all that, but also they can't. The people on the farm, and I mean, it was a $12 million farm, and they couldn't afford to employ help on the farm at the moment because they had droughts over the last couple of years. The sheep prices are down at the moment, and so on, and there just wasn't enough income to be able to pay an extra employee. And so I just asked the question. I said, well, if you hand your farm over to your children, how are they going to be able to pay you to live? Are they going to be able to pay you to live, or do they expect you to just go on the dole? And if you go on the dole, where are you going to live? There's only one house on this farm. There's only one house. There was no second house for, mum and dad to move back into the cottage or something like that. And in the end, I just said, look, based on where you are at the moment, the best course of action for you probably is just sell the thing. It's worth $12 million. There's no debt. They don't have any other assets off farm. Sorry, they have some superannuation. They've got $1 million worth of super. And but I said, sell the farm, even though you can't make a living out of it. You can put that $12 million in the bank at 5%. There's $600,000 a year in interest. Like, what are you out there? At age 72 and 74, why are you out there slogging yourself away, not making any money, when you'd be kicking up at the beach and enjoying life and using some of the sale price of the farm to help your daughter and in regard to what she wants to do with her life? Have you got thoughts around that? Have you see a bit of that?
A little bit, yeah. I think it's a really good time for people to assess, what they actually want in life versus what they've just been doing their whole life. And I understand that it's a very difficult process to go through and to wrap your head around, because you've put your whole life, all of your energy and money into this thing, and then to see it, I suppose, not in your life can be quite confronting. But I think a flip in perspective would be, this is what it's allowed you to now do and live out, how you can now live out the rest of your life. If kicking up the sand at the beach is what you want, then that's what you should have.
And they got a surfboard like you have, Michelle.
Yeah, that's right. Get a smaller farm if you still want to have your sheep or cows or whatever in the backyard. Do that, but something that you can manage, and also then help your children with, instead of giving them a problem.
Absolutely. And I mean, as I said before, sometimes that's the case. You've got expensive properties, but they're not making much income out of them. And you've got to ask yourself the question, well, prices are high at the moment. Do you sell now, stick the money in a investment portfolio, sit back and stress-free, have a nice lifestyle, but also be able to use some of that capital to help your kids along the way now, rather than waiting till you're 90 and drop dead, and they're 65. It's a bit late to be helping them. Then now's probably the best time to help your kids if you can.
Yeah.
There's another. Is that you're on the same sort of track with that, aren't you?
Yep.
Yep. There's another thing I just wanted to touch on with you this morning is mostly when we meet clients in the first instance, they've used their local lawyer, who's what we would call a general practitioner lawyer, and they've put in place just a basic will, which I call them "I love you" wills. I love you, honey. Here's everything. See you later. All the wealth just gets transferred from one person to the other, and so everything's in the whoever's still alive. It's in their name. It's at risk. If they remarry, it's at risk of divorce. It's at risk of the next lot of kids coming through from the second marriage. All these sorts of things. There's no asset protection or anything like that. And so most general practitioner solicitors tend to do these basic wills, and one of the very important parts of working with you guys is, and only a very, very small number of solicitors, it seems, in Australia actually recommend testamentary trusts and so on to their clients. But straight off the top, Michelle, if someone came in and said all they had was a basic will, what are the key reasons? I know you talked about 5 or 6 reasons on the whiteboard yesterday, but what are the sorts of things that asset protected wills are so much more valuable for in regard to what clients may need?
Yeah, so before I go into that, standard wills, basic wills still do have their place, but they're so few now. They're really becoming outdated with all of our complex lives, our complex families, and our complex wealth. So having asset protection built into your will, so the 5 or 6 things we typically talk about, as you love to hear about, you got your cup of tea.
Okay.
So can protect from separation if one of your children or beneficiaries separates from a partner. There are ways we can build in protection from that. Bloodline. So if you've passed all of your wealth on to a child and they pass away unexpectedly, their will probably says it's probably an I love you will, gives everything to their spouse, who goes on to have another relationship, maybe a few more kids. Meanwhile, your wealth is all going to somebody else's family you've never met. But putting that in a trust in your will can ensure that it goes to your grandchildren and stays in your family line. There are some wealth management opportunities as well. So if we've got minor beneficiaries with no particular obvious issues, but they grow up to have substance abuse issues or even have an accident, lose capacity, have a disability, we can put things in place now to enable those that inheritance to be managed for them well into the future, even for the rest of their life.
Yep.
So really amazing tool for looking after what you've worked really hard for generations.
Yeah, bloodline's very important, isn't it, in regard to, it's one of the things you guys talk about a lot, is making sure that the the wealth passes down through the bloodline, not to your daughter's next husband's 5 kids that he had before he met her, and so on, and just making sure it stays within your family and protecting that wealth, and that's especially important, especially in rural families where there may be a property involved that's been in the family line for generations and generations, and rural people obviously seem to have more attraction, more wedded to their properties than probably city people are. But you wouldn't want to see that property have to be sold just to pay out a matrimonial mistake. So asset protection is very important part of that process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think they're probably, for most people I see, they're probably the 2 key issues that are raised with me. Bloodline protection, how do I keep this in my family? And how do I protect this if my child separates from a partner? Because they've often gone through a separation themselves. They know what it's like. They want to protect their kids as much as possible.
Yep. One of the other things too is, and everyone needs to be more aware of it these days, Michelle, I guess, is that the risk of getting sued is so much higher now than it was. You guys don't handle this sort of stuff where the ambulance chasing lawyers get involved in, but the risk of even property owners getting sued for the thing we talk about all the time is spray drift, or if you if something happens where you use a toxic something or other, and the cattle next door get hold of it, and that wrecks their quality of meat that they're producing and all those sorts of things. You can be sued for so many things, whereas if the wealth that's been handed down through your family is in a protected trust, that can be excluded, can't it, from either people going bankrupt, being sued by their neighbour, and certainly the matrimonial and all those sorts of things. So, but I do take your point, and I probably am a bit cruel on people who turn up with just simple basic wills. In some cases, that's all that people need, and it's appropriate and so on. But certainly, as your wealth level gets up and as life becomes more complicated, and you've got children and all those sorts of things, pretty much why you wouldn't have a testamentary trust is a bit beyond me.
Yeah, and they're good for other kids' specific disability needs.
Sure.
If blended families as well. I just did one recently where we established a trust to put the half share of a house into, so it could be used by the surviving spouse for as long as they want, but that ultimately passes to the person who passed away, their children. So trust wills can be used in so many different ways for all of your unique circumstances. They're they're so important.
Yeah, and you're right. Blended families, that is a good reason to have them too, isn't it? So that someone can have a lifetime interest in something, but it still goes back to the bloodline, at the end of the day. Michelle, as usual, you we think when we start talking, 30 minutes is a long time, and here we are, we're nearly there, nearly there already. I must talk too much. But one of the things I just wanted to touch on was that a question came up the other day in regard to accountants, in regard to the process that we use and take clients through with our estate and succession planning process. Obviously, you guys as the lawyers are heavily involved all the way through, but it's important for us too that the relationship people have with their accountants, usually very long term. They've been there forever. They know everything about the clients and so on. And you do utilise the relationship people have with their accountants, don't you, in regard to doing the distribution matrix, the due diligence reports, and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, yesterday we were sitting with a client in your office, and we were zooming in with the accountant to make sure they were up to speed and happy with all the suggestions that you guys were putting in place. Do you see accountants as an integral part of the whole estate succession planning process?
Yes, definitely. So they've got usually all of the information, financial information, which we ultimately need to make sure we cover everything. But having everyone in a room at the same time is so good, especially for the client who receives some legal advice and then asks, is that good financially? And then everybody's talking at the same point from their different perspective, and we all come to a solution that works. It's so good to see it work, and it's really beneficial for everyone, I think.
Yeah, occasionally some professional advisors can feel a little intimidated and can feel they're losing control of their client relationship when we turn up and bring in the suits, I call it, bring in the lawyers and everyone else. And I mean, we help people. Sometimes people might need financial planners. They might need someone to do a farm viability report for them to see whether it is worthwhile handing it on to the next generation or selling it and doing something else. We help bring in people who have counselling needs in regard to mental health issues and all those sorts of things. There's so many different areas, we're sort of as ringmasters and we bring in the people at the right time. But there's two professionals we're always very keen on. And one is you guys as lawyers, because you're just so integral to the whole part. But the other one, probably not as visible, but certainly in the background, the accounting firms are very important to the work that we do in bringing all this together, and for you guys as well. So it's interesting. Sometimes, when one professional advisor wants to take their client away and do something individually with them instead of doing it all as a team, it can dissipate the result a little bit. But I think in most cases, people are happy to work together in a team and get a great outcome for everyone, and that's very important, I think.
Yeah, especially when you're talking face-to-face or on Zoom rather than just by email, you can get the intent that everyone's just trying to do the best thing for their client. So, yeah, it's really good.
Absolutely. I want you to know that a cup of tea is still here. I didn't even get to drink it while you were explaining all the advantages of testamentary trusts.
Too quick.
I'll give you 10 minutes next time. and a whiteboard.
Yeah.
That's fine. Hey, look, thanks, Michelle. Today, we just wanted to touch on those things in regard to how important doing a distribution matrix is as part of our process. The advantage of testamentary trusts in regard to asset protection and so on, in regard to their wills, and the importance of making sure we involve the accountants as part of the whole process and utilise all the wealth of knowledge that they have. So thanks for today, Michelle. Look forward to chatting with you next time we catch up. Have a great day, everyone. See you, Michelle.
Bye.